sorry that we have connection problems. I'm to speak very briefly on security issues in the context of Nigerian Army, Nigerian Police Force, and public sea. I want to say that for more than 6,000 years, that the history of migration started from the Niger Valley. Indigenous people always try to guide us based on dignity, in terms of governance, in terms of economy, in terms of democratic principles. We've had several great empires in the past. We know the Ekame Empire, the Utumadanto Empire, the Empire, Ishekiri, and many others, which were classical examples of attempts by African indigenous communities on their affairs in terms of the political economy and also in terms of security. They had other methods of their own people, prevention of crime, and also defense of their state infrastructure, by the start of the time. We now look at the fact that what many of them going was not just about philosophy, about art, about culture. It was also about the ability to fit, in terms of the mind and the missions that were powerful. The state for centuries before the coming of European power. When the colonial powers came, they were able to conquer people that are pocket resistance. But what made it to be able to sustain Africa in terms of weapons of war, they were able to take over most of it. And the state in the progress was sustained by the forces, the military of the British Empire. And when we look at the fact that the military left in 1960, the kind of army that was built during the era, an army that was sustained the British Empire to protect the British powers, to protect their trade. The army was not, it was built to the authority of the people, but the state as
Adewale, could I hold you a second? Perhaps if you just do audio.
Hello?
Perhaps we should just do audio, lose the video, because your line is breaking. Just give us audio.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello? Okay. So, one look at the origin of the Nigerian army. It was an offshoot of the British colonial army. Was the British imperial interest. So in 1963, when the history of Nigerian army began, it was more or less not an army that was a kind of army recruiting people based on their capability or their knowledge, but actually based on brute force, their ability to sustain British imperial power. And it started with Lieutenant Glover of the Royal Navy, who picked about 80 indigenes of Hausa extraction. These 80 people were escaping from the turbulence in the north of the time. He brought them to Lagos and then trained them, and they gave them the name the Glover Hausa Army. And then later, this was what actually formed the core of what we now have as Nigerian Army. And they were trained to see the local people as they were trained to be hostile to the local people. They were trained to define British interests. They were trained to see themselves as a special force, a privileged force, not as a force that were trained to protect local communities and indigenous heritage. And the Nigerian police that came in about 1820 was also, with about 1,200 force, was also drawn from the Hausa constabulary. In 1896, when the first police came and the first police formation was established, there were basically 1,200 people that were made of people from northern extraction. So the colonial army and the colonial police were basically constituted by people from northern Nigeria. And I think the growth, the pattern of growth of the Nigerian army and Nigerian police has taken this form in terms of its structure, in terms of its command structure, in terms of its form and content. It has always been dominated by the ground norm, the founding philosophy of the establishment, from the colonial era, and then the formation of the army and police in the post-colonial state. The command structure of the army and police today remains skewed towards against the people. It remains skewed against the indigenous communities, against the traditional communities that make up the component state of Nigeria today. And if you look at the command structure of the Nigerian police force, for instance, that has about 36 state commands, and then 12 zones and 7 administrative structures. They are structured in a way to create a system where command structure is determined from, it's a kind of pyramid structure where the instructions are given by the IG down to the local level. So it's not people driven, it's not democratic, it's not promotion, demotion, and command structure are decided at the top. So the people are excluded, they don't have input, in security affairs. Everything is just controlled by just one person at the top. And if you look at the army too, it is the same garrison structure. And we believe that the democratic structure of Nigeria cannot be sustained if the army itself is not a reflection of the wish and aspirations of the people. And that's why over the years, we have seen an army that is hostile to the people. We have seen a police force that is very hostile to indigenous communities. We see an army that sees itself as an army that is supposed to protect individuals in power, not to protect the people, the people that make up the state. We see a police force that is designed to protect individuals in power and not to protect the state. So the state is defined in terms of individuals, not in terms of the people, not in terms of the populace, not in terms of communities. But the police and army are seen as structures that are to protect those individuals that are occupying strategic positions. And then we look at the recruitment patterns of the police. It is done in a way that we talk about quota system, we talk about states, about 30 states. The states were not created actually based on the on the free prior informed consent of the people. So you have states created by fiat. So when you ask the army to be recruited based on these states, there's no way that it's not going to be lopsided. It's not going to favor, it's not going to be the genuine representation of the people, because the states that were created themselves were not created based on the wish and aspirations of the people. So when you have 30 states and then the army and police have to be picked from these states, definitely it's going to affect, it's not going to be representative in terms of the ethnic composition of Nigeria. Then the orientation of the army in terms of in terms of their relation with public institutions, it has been designed in a way that does not see the people as a kind of it's not people driven. It's driven by the need to protect those that are occupying political positions. So the challenge of the Nigerian army today is self-evident in the fact that the army is not active in internal matters of security that should have been left for the police, because the army has to be employed to define political structures. They have to be employed, in electoral contest. They have to be employed even in defining certain corporate institutions. They have to be employed by individuals to define their homes. They have to be employed by individual civilians, either to protect their homes or their business interests. So they are not in any way structured to protect the general interests of the people. And that's why you see most of the time that the army cannot actually be seen as an army that is an army of the people. Then we have seen a situation where Nigeria, since 1960, that has to be on the street. It was as bad. Last 5 years, the army and the police to protect people have now decided to take their hand. Also refer to report missions to militia organizations into the army, because the army also is something that is owned by people. Also the police, if you have any infraction, if your rights are violated, most people prefer to go and hire military organizations because they believe that justice can be dispensed quickly than going to the Nigerian police. So we are gradually moving towards a situation where the people have lost confidence in the army and the police, and people are taking laws into their hands. People are protecting their communities by resorting to personal help. People are defending themselves against terrorism by deciding to arm themselves and to arm their communities because of the loss of confidence in the Nigerian army and the police. And today we have a situation where the Nigerian state is talking about policing.
I think we've lost connection again.
And I think that's a very good idea. But I think in terms of the offers that are being presented to Nigerians, the concept of community policing as well is this global standard. Hello?
We can hear
Hello?
now. We can hear now. Well,
hello?
We can hear you.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Yeah, they are okay. They are talking about community policing.
Yeah.
I think we've lost
I think
Mr.
it's been
Adeoye.
booted off.
But time is about up anyway, in terms of the time that we've assigned to that session. So what I'm going to do now is to call up the discussants to respond. And the first discussant to respond is Idowu Ibrahim. You're currently on mute. Perfect.
Okay. I'm grateful to the organizers of this conference. It's been wonderful so far, and I'm grateful. I thank the lead discussant. He has really dealt with the topic perfectly, and I just have to say that when matters of forming the police and the army, it's a topic that resonates with every Nigerian because of how much the police and the army are very, very important to maintaining democracy and especially ensuring fundamental rights of individuals in society. However, like many things in Nigeria, on paper or in theory, they look laudable, but in reality or in practice, it's the total opposite that is obtainable. And that's what we have seen so far with the police and the army as well. Because I personally, as a legal practitioner, I would say that while training to become a legal practitioner, we all had this idea of coming to the Nigerian polity and make a difference. And we were taught all these fanciful, or let me say, what we call legal fiction, as it turned out to be, about how things should work in the country. But when we came to practice, the opposite is what we met, like every other thing in Nigeria. For example, it was in practice that we later got to know that bail is not free, as taught in the law school. We discovered that justice is essentially commodified in the sense that you can hardly get the police to do anything without having to mobilize them. That's the term they give, or that's the term that is used down here. It's just mobilization. So your client has, or your client has believes his own right has been wronged, and you want to seek the police. You want the police to prosecute the other person or accused person. You write a petition to the police. You have to mobilize the police while submitting your petition. When your petition is approved, you still mobilize the police, the police team that is supposed to act on the petition. Should the police team invite the accused person and the person refuse to honor the invitation, you still have to mobilize the police to go and arrest this person on your behalf. And what the ripple effect of this is that the poor masses hardly obtain or secure justice. It's for you to get crimes prosecuted, you need to have some form of financial ability to get things done. And this, considering the fact that poverty is very high in Nigeria, you cannot, that means almost half of the population are somehow denied access to seek redress when crimes are committed against them. And and another reality we got to encounter in practice is that even as legal practitioners, no matter how right you think your client's position is, you can't even go to the police stations or go to the army barracks and try to enforce this right as it is. You just have to go cap in hand and trying to negotiate a settlement or resolution, which does not really, this shouldn't be the case in a democratic setting that we deceive ourselves that we are practicing as it is. But that's what is obtainable in Nigeria. And you can see that even the way the dichotomy or whatnot, the dissonance between theories and reality is even still present to date. Recently, we had the EndSARS protest to seek redress from police, to seek reforms. After just a few, let's say 2-3 months, while fine, we don't have SARS on ground again, but all the things that were complained about are back on the streets. Police are back to harassing people. And when we check, recently a new police act was passed. That was September 2020. And one of the laudable provisions of that act is Section 37 of that act, which says it prohibits torture and inhuman treatment of arrested persons. But that was September 2020. February 2021, Mr. Macaroni and other protesters were arrested at Lekki Toll Gate, and we saw what was done to them. The same torture that was supposed to be curtailed with the new act. And you could see that the police themselves were the ones going against their own law. And if that is what is obtained, and you see that that's in fact really is the reality on ground in Nigeria, and it contradicts what is on paper. So many times we've had several reforms, but overall reforms in Nigeria tend to only ensure temporary solutions, or at best superficial solutions. We hardly get concrete fundamental solutions to these problems. And in my own opinion, I feel the best reforms we can prefer to the security problems in Nigeria is actually socio-political reform, whereby the whole system is arranged in a way whereby which ensures that the forces act alongside or in tune with the dictates of democracy.
Thank you, Mr. Idowu. Thank you, Idowu Ibrahim, and we definitely look forward to the breakout sessions to hear more from you on that topic. I would like to move on now and invite Mr. George Alili. You're probably on mute because I saw that you're on. Mr. George Alili, please. So whilst we are waiting for Mr. George Alili to come on, I think we'll just move on to Ms. Pamela Ibeh, and then Ms. Alili can come on afterwards.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, I just wanted to thank the Adewale gave a great historical context for the problem we have with the police and the army. Thanks for that. And also thanks to Idowu for the listing some of the problems on the ground. Now, my contribution is based on the premise that ensuring security of life and property of citizens is a basic responsibility of any government. Once we agree on that and then see the problems that we have in this area, it shouldn't be a big leap to think that we must have to do something about it. Law enforcement, represented by the police, is a major avenue to successfully bearing the responsibility. And this is the responsibility of the government, because insecurity contributes to societal breakdown. This shows how important the role of law enforcement is. And there are so many examples in Nigeria to show that the Nigerian society is at the breaking point. We're actually collapsing, whether we realize it or not. So we must do something about this area. I looked at some of the issues with policing. Some of them are inherent in the police structure itself, and some have to do with the general problem in the society. But I think one major thing is in recruiting, and Adewale pointed to that in his presentation. Hiring has to be, we must, in fixing the problem, look at who we recruit to that area. We must also look at how we train them. Recruitment goes side by side with training. We must provide them adequate resources, and that includes compensation. And I know corruption is a big problem, but once we have given them everything they need to work, then if they're corrupt, it's easy to deal with it. If you don't pay someone well, you kind of don't know how to question when he looks to find ways to feed his family. So corruption is a big deal, but we must hire well, train well, provide resources, and then fight corruption. But another big thing is the structure. Adewale also talked about the structure of the police. We must decentralize it. The way it's on right now, it's unwieldy. It's not working for a society like Nigeria. Actually, for a lot of places, such structures do not work. We have to decentralize it from going all the way to the top to one person. And when I mention in solutions, one of my solutions was community policing. And I want to define that, because it looks to me like Adewale, before his time was up, was about to address community policing. It looks like in Nigeria, they're proposing what they have termed community policing. Maybe we should define that, because what I'm referring to is a question of where the police, the ones that keep society safe, are part of each society where they're working in. They're not in barracks somewhere like the army. They are part of your community. They live with you. That will do away with barracks and things like that. And we also have to work on the image of the police. Because of all the problems we're now discussing, there's a very poor image of the community, of the police with the people. So that we can fix by education. We can also, once we get the police to where we want them to be, Then we teach the people to see them for what they are, for the roles they have to play. So solutions proposed, I'm thinking about decentralization, restructuring the police. I'm thinking about community policing as I have defined it. I'm also thinking of defined roles. Right now in some parts of the country, police play some role in prosecution. Just like I don't think the army should be doing the job of the police, I don't think the police should be involved in prosecution. I think their job should be restricted to keeping the community safe. And that must go with, like I said, training. And we should have checks and balances in place. Parts of that would be imbibing some relevant core concepts, like freedom of the press. If we ensure, that's why I said that the problems with policing and security is tied in some form to the main problems of society. Once we fix our society, then we can fix our police. When freedom of press works like it should, they can check the police in some ways. And other core concepts to imbibe to make security work. It's a commitment to the rule of law. I just can't say enough about that. That is the beginning of everything. Once we have those laws, like Idowu said, it's right on paper. The theories are great. We have laws, we have domestic laws and international treaties that Nigeria subscribes to that forbid some of the things that are going on. So the rule of law is what makes sure that we hold their feet to the fire to keep to those things that are already on paper. But you see, I must say this, lest I lose time to say it. There must be a political will to change. A protest like EndSARS cannot just drop off when the problems are still there. There must be sustained pressure to get what we're asking for. I'll give you an example, like in the United States, like almost every day now, somebody gets shot. And as soon as that happens, there are people there saying no. And this is like daily, like you can't stop. There must be sustained pressure to see that these things come about. There must also be education of citizens to understand their rights. There are things the police can't do to you. Now, when you train the police not to do it, you also train the people to say, no, you can't do that.
So thank you, Ms. Pamela. Thank you very much. We really look forward to more discussions as well. So I would like to invite David Adeoye Fadipe, please, to come on.
Okay, I'm going to be really quick because my name is David Fadipe and I'm here in Hertfordshire in the United Kingdom. So I have to say that I read the paper presented by Mr. Adeoye, my namesake, and it was fantastic. What I got from that paper, first and foremost, is I have some historical perspective in terms of how the structure of the Nigerian Army and the Nigerian police were formed. I mean, when you think about the fact that he talked about the first enlisting to Nigerian Army was in 1863, and I did make a note there that that was the wrong name. There wasn't Nigerian Army because there wasn't Nigerian in 1863. But then there you go, by Lieutenant Glover or something. They were all of outside extraction. And then, so it looks like for me, and those outside extraction, 18 of them were running from turbulence in the north back then. So when we talk about the structure has been skewed by the so-called, the British or colonial masters to serve their own personal interests, because they decided to use what they consider to be less intelligent. I mean, I'm sorry, this is not an insult, but less intelligent people of the North against the people of the South, because they needed to get away with certain things. The same was the police. For example, it talks about 1,200 force drawn from Hausa Constabulary was formed in 1879. And that was a good 17 years before the Lagos police force came into effect in 1896. So if we look at all of these things, we can see where the problem of the structure of the Nigerian security is coming from. Now, quickly, I'm going to move on from that. You know, the traditional, okay. The other thing is that, for example, if you look at the problem we have today, history is good. I mean, I'm a believer of history, but I always believe in the present and the future, how we move forward. And Pamela and Ibrahim has dwelled quite largely on that. But I want to take us quickly back to a quote by Sanusi Lamido. Sanusi, that was in April 2013. I would never forget when he was making that speech. I think he just briefly left the mantle of being the CBN governor at the time. And it says that no matter how much we spend in security, no matter how many guns we give to security forces, there will not be security until these people have food on their table. That means that, you know, it's more about poverty. Addressing security problems without addressing the fundamental economic causes is only a short-term measure. And he said yesterday would be Niger Delta. Niger Delta was quite profound at the time. Today it is Boko Haram. Tomorrow it will be something else. So he said we must address the problem of youth and their future across the country. Now I brought this in. I mean, that's not the whole story there, but I'm going to stop on that one because if we look at what the problem is in Nigeria in terms of insecurity, kidnapping, banditry, and all of that, it's a result of economic problems. So when I said, okay, then I said enough of history from me anyway. It's no secret that the security situation in Nigeria today is so bad that it is no longer safe even to be in your own house. I mean, that was the terrible thing. I go to Nigeria quite a lot, and there are things you can do or cannot do. You can really not trust anybody. You don't know who is the bandit or this and that. Now, I said about the future. And like I said, Pamela and Idowu has actually touched on a few things that I noted down in my submissions. First, there's supposed to be a complete overhaul of Nigerian security architecture. From the service chiefs down to the lowest corporal. And I also said about the establishment of state police, which is where what Pamela, I think, was calling community policing. Now, in America, for example, where Pamela is, I mean, I don't know, you have about over 50 states, and each of those states actually have their own state police. And that, you know, I think that we're practicing American Constitution. So if we're practicing that, having state police will bring security, will bring law enforcement into the community more than it is right now. And I also said that the federal government power should be whittled down. And if we have state police, I mean, power should be devolved to the regions through the state structure. The police should be well compensated to reduce levels of corruption. The only security outfit to be in the hands of the federal government should actually be the DSS and every other corruption monitoring agency like the FCC and ICPC.
Thank you, Mr. Fadipe. We need to wrap up now. Thank you very much for all the points that you made. Okay, so we are going to invite Yemi Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kehinde. Can I share my screen, please?
Of course.
Okay. So I'm just trying to share my screen.
You should be able to share.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Thank you. I think you've still disabled me. I still can't share. Okay, got it. Thanks. Okay. Look, thank you very much to the organizers for a very well-organized conference and giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on police reform, policing and army reform. Much of what I'm going to say has been covered to a large extent by the previous three speakers. So, but I'm going to start first by giving some background. The problems experienced by the Nigerian police and the security forces in Nigeria is not new to Nigeria. It's been experienced by every country in the world where during their period of development, the police and the army have been used to oppress people by those in power. So if you look at the development of the police forces, of the army and the police in Russia, how they've evolved, even in the UK, in America, in France, remember that during the early days of the French Revolution, the security forces were actually firing on the demonstrators. The same thing with them in the UK, where the police and indeed the army have been used to put down violently demonstration by workers. So abuse by the police, the armed forces, is not new to Nigeria. Also, if you come down to police itself, they've been used in various guises for anything but actually policing. So if you look at, I mean, a case in point is an example in America where the police seem intent on decimating the black population. But even if you leave the racism, if you look at the Chicago mob in America, the Italian mafia, you can see that police at some point in time in their history have been used for not to safeguard the ordinary people, but for those in power. So what we see in Nigeria is not unknown, it's not different. So that is the background I would like us to bear in mind, that it's not new to us. But as these countries have developed, what they've done is to be able to bring the police and the armed forces, subject them to civil authority, and make their core duty the protection of people, so that they are not over the people, but are subject to the will of the people. Now, I've heard a lot of talk about we need to restructure the police, we need to have state police, community policing. But my view on that is that currently, as we are where we are now, state police will not work, or restructuring the current framework. State police would not work because what it would do is replicate what we have currently. It's just going to be a transfer across of the current bad structure into the state. So, I mean, and we have at state police, we have the OPC, or local policing, to use that word. We have the OPC, we have the Amotekun, the vigilantes, and we know the abuses that those people have occasioned. They've killed people. Recently, we saw the Amotekun arresting some students for dancing, or for young students. So they will abuse it. They will. Currently, if we do it right as it is now, we're just transferring bad habit across down to the local level. Restructuring as well. So what do? I'm proposing that, I'm not far removed from everybody, but it's got to be a reform and a restructure approach. Both have to be done in tandem. You can't restructure without reforming, and you can't reform without restructuring. Because reform is to make changes in something, and restructure is to organize differently. If you decentralize the police and make it local, you're restructuring it. If you reform them and change them without restructuring, you will still have the same. But if we do both together in tandem, then we will have a much better security and police force. And just to run through, legal reforms, better laws, reforming the judiciary, reorientation, which would cover recruitment, training, and welfare. That would be this should actually be the reform aspect. And then under restructure approach, decentralize the police, the army, as we've said, regional police, regional armies, and I'm glad Mrs. Ibeh said that. Scrap police barracks. We don't need them. Make the police reside within the community. Independent oversight of the police, subject to civil authorities, participation of the citizenry in the armed forces and police, maybe military service plus NYSC, reserve army, local police, but the citizens should participate. And finally, if we are able to do all this together, I think what we would have, having a restructure and a reform approach, is accountability of the armed forces and the police and better effectiveness. So the police, where we are now, is just natural. But to get to where we want them to be, it's got to be a restructure and reform approach working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for that
Thank you.
presentation. So I would like to just go back to see whether we have Mr. George Adeli now to as the last speaker discussing for this section. Are you back on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Many thanks. I'm pleased to be here in the Fatherland family. My interventions, a lot has been covered by the earlier speakers. I would rather want to thank them for deconstructing this discourse. I will go straight to the point. My intervention will be in the areas of reform of the police and the armed forces. I will say the armed forces, I'm looking at the army within the context of this discourse as the armed forces, because the three services are involved in internal security. I propose a three-pronged approach for police reforms and the modification of the armed forces force structure. One, we need to establish state police with adequate safeguards and checks against abuses. I think is what is one of the things lacking in the current structure is the lack of accountability. Once you have strict accountability and you have someone who takes control at the local level, things will be a lot better. Secondly, we should retain the police for interstate matters and for those of national nature. The third aspect is that the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps should be transformed into the National Guard, upgrade their training so that they can serve as a bulkhead between the military and the police. My take here is that we should keep the military away from purely police duties and minimize infractions. We need to retain the armed forces as a fighting machine for national defense. And with these changes, we need a clearinghouse. So what do? We need something to coordinate. In this regard, the Ministry of Internal Affairs should transform into the Ministry of Homeland Security with the following agencies: the Federal Police, National Guard, Department of State Security, Nigerian Immigration Service, Nigerian Correctional Service, the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agencies. And for the military, I must add that we already have an ongoing interministerial committee on the reform of the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces. It's ongoing as we speak. So we will still require the armed forces because today what we have is hybrid and irregular warfare. We still need them to come in when things are required. However, our experience has shown that we have a lot of problems. So what do we need to do is to decouple the fighting elements from the services and place them under the Chief of Defense Staff, who derives authority from the Ministry of Defense and hence the President. In this regard, the service chiefs will now be limited to recruitment, training, doctrine, administration, and provisions of platforms and other military hardware. Now we will have regional, what is called Unified Operational Military Commands, that will take charge of issues that has to do with national security. With this, we will decouple the military from purely policing duties because we now have National Guard, which have with the trainings that have been upgraded, and then we'll have state police with proper oversight and accountability. Thank you very much.